So let's get started. Number one, the first concept. Our objective from creating a resume is not to create a resume. Our objective is to create a resume that works. Now let's talk about what defines a resume that works. We're going to take a quick poll. So I'm going to open up the poll, and you're going to tell me, if you would please, let me open up the poll here. There we go. Now please tell me, what is our objective from creating a resume? Is it to get a job? Is it to get an interview? Is it to get a phone call? Is it all of the above? Or is it none of the above? Okay, so we got 67% who said all of the above. 8% said get an interview, and 19% said get a phone call. Very interesting, because if I took this poll last year, about 19% would say, 20% would say get a job, not get a phone call. But it seems like the job-seeking community is arriving at the right conclusion, right? So now 67% said all of the above. That is, you create a resume to get a job, get an interview, and get a phone call. Well, I'll tell you what the right answer is. The right answer is to get a phone call, not all of the above. Now, why is that? Shouldn't the resume get you a job and get you an interview as well? The answer is no. If your resume is aimed at getting you a job or an interview, it has too much information. It has too much irrelevant information. And then it doesn't raise the curiosity, right, to get the phone call. When you create a resume, your objective is only to put enough information that ignites the interest of the person who is going to call you, to ignite the employer's curiosity and to get them to call you, right? So remember that that's rule number one, or the objective number one, is that when we construct a resume together, our goal is only to produce a phone call. So everybody remember that one. Remember the first rule, the first objective. All right, number two, focus is more important than diversity. So showing focus when speaking about your skills is more important than showing diversity. Now look at the resume on the left-hand side. See how the resume is bordered in red? That's what not to do. And the resume on the right is bordered in green, and that's what to do. So if you look at the resume on the left, on the very top you have sales, customer service, and management, and we call those paths, right? And that's what you're right now searching to arrive or achieve, is to get these paths that is going to drive the content of your resume. So on the left, the resume has placed 3 paths on the top of the resume. And the logic behind it for this person may be, well, I know sales, I know customer service, and I know management, and if I put all of these on a resume, the employer is looking at this, is going to say, well, I'm getting 3 for the price of 1. Well, that's great. I'm getting someone who knows sales, customer service, and management. That logic is inaccurate. Employers don't look at your resume in that way. There's a difference between the perspective of a job seeker and what they see and the conclusions they arrive at, and the perspective of an employer and how they see things. A job seeker may look at this and say, well, that's great, 3 for the price of 1. It's diversity. Employers should love that. Employers will look at this and say, okay, so I've got 1,000 resumes. I've got 100 of those 1,000 who are focused on sales. That means they're probably masterful in the art of sales. That's all these people know. And I've got 900 other resumes that are great at everything else. So let me focus on these 100 that only know sales. I'm not going to spend time looking at those other 900 resumes. So if you look at the resume that's on the right, the green one, this is a focused resume. This person is saying, all I know is customer service management, and all I'm pursuing with your company is customer service management. Employers look at this resume and say, okay, so this is one I should invest my time in, because it seems like the position of customer service management that we posted, we've received a resume that is the most pure, the most focused, the most viable for this particular job. That's rule number 2. Focus is more important than diversity. Rule number 3, or objective number 3. Rules have changed, and in fact, rules change just about every 6 months. The employment market is changing so rapidly. This has to do with improvements in technology, globalization, all of these things that the internet has done for our lives, a lot of it being good, and some of it perhaps requires adaptation, right? But nonetheless, it changes the landscape. And so the rules have changed, and one of those rules that have changed is that companies care more about how your skills are relative to their positions, and not so much interested, they are not so much interested in viewing a sequential order of your work experience, although that may be what they tell you they're interested in, or that may be the general conception. You see, I'm curious, when was it in the history of employment, right? If you look at the history of employers hiring and the workforce looking for employment, if you look at that history, when was it that a resume was created? And when the resume was created, because I'm sure there was some time in history, maybe in the, before the Civil Rights Act in 1964, maybe before that, or sometime after, a resume was not required. You would show up, the employer would look at you, and they would hire you or not hire you. And they use a lot of different measures to do that. A lot of different matrices that we don't use today. But at some point, a resume became relevant, and when it did, someone decided, and I don't know who that person is, or was it a group of people, who said, you're going to put a sequence together that starts from earliest to the latest, or the latest to earliest, and it will summarize what you've done. And everything you've ever done should be on that resume in sequence. We call that a resume. Okay, so until 20 years ago when the internet came about, or whenever internet came about, we followed that rule. When the internet changed the way people look for jobs, this sequence lost its value. This is because the internet made it possible for more people to seek out employers. So you have millions of people at one time. They can all apply for one job. See, before the internet, you couldn't do that. You had to go into the local paper, and that paper was only available in, let's say, Orange County. People in Los Angeles didn't see that paper. And in that paper, limited amount of people could look at a job, and only limited amount of people could call and show up for that job. So a newspaper ad could yield maybe 15 or 20 candidates. Now that same ad is shown globally, and millions of people can see that ad and thousands apply. So because of that increase in the number of applications, the sequence has lost its value. It no longer matters what your sequence is. It matters, out of that sequence, what's relevant to each job. So if you have 10 different things in your sequence, like for instance, when I was in my teens, I delivered pizza. I've also worked in a call center. The bulk of my experience has been in HR, but I've also done presentations. I've also done motivational speaking. I've done all these different things. If I'm applying for a job that is specifically for HR management, do I also include in that sequence my pizza delivery or motivational speaking? Well, the old rules would tell you, yeah, you put everything on your resume. But the new rules reject that idea. It devalues your resume if that's what you're doing, right? So that's number 3. We no longer put a sequence, an order to our work experience. Now, I know a lot of these objectives that I'm sharing with you, this being the third one, go against every grain, go against every thought or idea that you have about how a resume is constructed. Thousands of people are creating the resume and sending it out, but they're not getting responses from employers. I'm showing you why that is, right? So if the old ideas that we hold about how resumes are created is not working, then we must change. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. The concepts that we're sharing with you here sound different, and they may go against what your beliefs are about how a resume is created, but we know these work because we track a 70% placement ratio. Participants who follow these principles, 7 out of 10 find employment. And you know the 3 that don't find employment? We were in a meeting a few months ago, and our board member said, hey, we need to increase this number. We try to get it to 80 or 90. Wouldn't it be great if it's at 100%? And I firmly believe that number will not improve or go above 70% because there are 30% of the people who will maintain those old ideas. They will still create resumes with a sequence or break the rules, these 8 concepts, break these 8 concepts that we're talking about. Why? I don't know. I wish they didn't. I wish they followed what worked. But nonetheless, we know that the 7 out of 10 that do follow the principles find employment very quickly. So this is the third objective. Fourth one is do not mix skills on the same resume. Now, let's think about a person who's a human resource manager. This person also knows how to train people. He's a training manager. And he's a customer service manager. So he's a manager, but he's got 3 different types of skills in management. Now, would this person be, when he applies for a job or she applies for a job, would they apply for management? Or would he or she apply for human resource manager or training manager? And then when they do apply for either one of those positions, what do they put on their resume? Well, this objective, this rule tells you that you need to separate those skills. So if your skills were fruits, let's say human resource management was an orange, training manager was a celery, and customer service management was an apple, if you were to juice these fruits, you get 3 different cups, 3 different juices, right? Traditionally, what we did is we took these 3 different juices and we put them into one big cup. And we send that big cup to every employer. Now, there was a time this worked. There was no problem doing that. 20 or 30 years ago, if you showed up to an interview and you gave them this big cup, sure, it contained 3 juices, and when someone drank out of it, when the employer whom you gave that cup to drank out of it, it didn't taste good. It tasted downright nasty, but you were there to distinguish the tastes for them. See, you were there in person. Remember when you applied for a job in a newspaper? You didn't send them your resume first. You went to an interview yourself first, then you gave them their resume, right? Back then, you gave them the resume, but you were there too to distinguish the flavors. Sure, you mixed everything up into one place, but you were there to say, hey, do you taste the orange juice in there? And when the person drank from it, like, oh, this doesn't taste very good, but yeah, I can taste the orange juice. But today, you're not there to distinguish the tastes or the flavors for them, right? You send them the resume, and you have all these things mixed in, and when they drink out of the cup, it doesn't taste very good. And you're not there in person to distinguish the tastes. So what we need to do is to distinguish it for them. You don't want to send them a resume and have them guess or try to figure out the flavors or try to look for it, because they're not going to take the time to do that. We need to distinguish these tastes, these flavors for them. Number 5, when we create a resume, we create a base resume first. This is really important, and this is the one that most miss. So I want you to really pay attention at this time, okay? So if you were kind of distracted up until now, and you were looking at the screen, listening, but you were distracted, it may or may not be okay. But now I really need your attention. So I'm going to give you a few moments. In fact, let me see if it's time for break. Maybe we'll. Yeah, no, I'll explain this now, then we'll take a break. So I really need your attention right now. Do I have everybody's attention? Okay. create your base resume first. So here's what that means. A person who possesses skills in customer service management, engineering, and accounting will first create a base resume for one position. So let's say you have 3 different paths. You're going to choose one path first. So we're going to choose customer service management, and we're going to create a base for it. Now, when I say base, think about soup. You know how when you create soup, you have a base to start out with, and the base tastes the same regardless of the ingredients. You have no ingredients. The base all tastes the same. In order for the taste to change or the flavor to change, you have a base resume for customer service, but you add different types of flavors to it. So the first base has broccoli in it, and it's going to taste different than the second one that has shrimp in it, and the third one that has chicken in it. Now that's a big chicken for that bowl, but you get the idea, right? So we started out with the same base, but we add the flavors later. Right? So every one of you is going to have a customer service base. Now, I have thousands of samples of bases. So for customer service management, if you need a base, I can send you a copy, and you can look at that, and then you can determine if the base you're creating is kind of on target or not, right? So your career coach can help you with that. Okay, so the base for customer service is going to have general information about customer service. So it's going to be a general resume. Another way to think of it is, think about an employer who's looking for customer service management. Let's translate that to fruits. Okay? So a customer manager is looking for apples. Well, apples are different in nature. You know, you have an apple that's yellow. You have an apple that's green. You have an apple that is red. And then you have an apple that's rotten among all 3. So you have a yellow apple that's rotten just a little bit. You have a green apple that's rotten a lot. And you have a red apple that's rotten on the bottom. So you have an employer that's looking for a red apple that's rotten on the bottom. So you can't send them a resume that's just an apple. Right? You want a red apple that's rotten on the bottom. So what we do when we create our base resume is we create an apple resume. And the details of whether it's yellow with rotten on the left, green rotten on the right, or red rotten on the bottom, we're going to add those later. But we're going to create an apple resume. Now, if my accounting is orange, I'm going to also create a base orange resume, right? That's going to be very different than my apple resume, but it's going to be a base orange, right? So if I get an employer that's looking for only apples that are red, that are rotten on the bottom, I will take an base resume that's green, and I'm going to add, that's red. I'm going to get an apple resume that is just an apple resume, no colors to it. And I'm going to add red, and I'm going to add rotten on the bottom, and then send that employer the resume so they can see I do have red apples that are rotten on the bottom. Now, what if you don't have red apples that are rotten on the bottom? Then you can't apply to that job, right? I mean, you can, but chances are they won't get back to you, because they're looking for a red apple that's rotten on the bottom, and you have only an apple resume. And customer service management are different in nature in that way, right? Okay, so is there any questions about what a base resume is? Donald asks, can you show an example of a base resume? We're going to do that next week, right? So that's why I'm saying don't start on anything about your resume this week, because even though you get some information that makes sense, you won't be ready to create your resume. You're going to spend a lot of time doing things that we have been honing for the past 11 years that you're not going to be able to do in just a couple of weeks. We're going to show you exactly how to create a base resume next week, and then where the information goes, place that for you. We're going to show all of that to you next week. Okay, I should also say, somebody said, please send me some sample of your resumes, the career coach help that you all get is for the first 30 days following the sessions. Now, as you know, we are an organization where we, through these sessions, we help two causes: child homelessness that stems from unemployment, and veterans. And we have job seekers that support those causes. And those who support those causes, we have a vehicle for them to receive career coaching for 12 months. I'll explain that more in detail at the end. So the sample resumes, the inventory that we have of all these different sample resumes, those who are supporting our causes, they get access to that. But you may not need access to that. So you don't have to support the causes that NEC is pursuing to obviously be successful, right? You can use the information that we'll share with you in these sessions and still be successful. But if you're looking for a career coach, I'll share with you exactly what the process is like at the conclusion of today's session. Any more questions about this particular objective, which is number 5? This is a really important objective here. Somebody asks, it's really hard to imagine the base resume without seeing one, but we can accept the concept of it and move on. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Eric. You may not get the concept, but you will by next week, hopefully. All right, let's go to number 6. Get the path across within 7 seconds. Now, so the path is what goes on the top of your resume. Now, consider the following example. We want to get this path across within 7 seconds. Let's look at this example. Imagine you are a hiring manager looking to hire customer service managers. You place an ad and receive thousands of resumes, and you screen those resumes within 7 seconds. So think about this scenario. Okay, now here's resume 1. Resume 1, here I go back here. So you're a hiring manager looking to hire customer service managers. Within 7 seconds, tell me what the path in this resume is. You're hiring customer service managers. Tell me if this is a person you want to hire. Well, what employers do is they look at this resume and they screen the resume very quickly. Now, screening means you look at words to help identify for you whether this person is a viable customer service manager. So let's look at some words together. I see computer programs, I see wholesale, and I see lending. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine those 3 words. Please go ahead and close your eyes. Okay, so here, let me it looks like we're right at the break time. Let's take a break and meet back here at 11:10. We're going to come back here at 11:10. I apologize for that. I should have waited for this segment until the break is done. I'll see you in 10 minutes. I want you to think about the image that these 3 words create. Admin, computer programs, and wholesale. I'm sorry, admin, clerical, and administrative assistant. Is that a different image than the first one? The answer is yes, and I want you to categorize that image into a category, right? So now you have 2 categories. Okay, let me stop here. And I just realized that while I was speaking, I was not recording this session. And so that you can have this with you after the session, I'll have to go back and kind of re-explain number 6 from the beginning. I apologize for this. And so you'll just get to hear me talk about this one more time. Sorry about that. So let me go over the 6th objective. So we have so far talked about 6 objectives, right? So the 6th one is to get the path across within 7 seconds. Employers, when they look at the resume, within about 7 seconds, they'll decide if you're the right match or not. So I want you to consider the following example. You are a hiring manager looking to hire customer service managers. You place an ad and you receive thousands of resumes, and you screen through those thousands of resumes within about 7 seconds. This is the first one. This is one of those resumes you're screening, and maybe out of thousands of resumes, the talent management software screens through the content and gives you only 100. Now let me tell you a little bit about talent management softwares very quickly. So there are lots of different systems that employers use today in different ways. These systems have different functions. You know, one of them, for instance, may scan through the content and rank the resumes by star. 5 stars is the highest rank and 1 star is the lowest, for instance. Some of them may trash a bunch of resumes and only keep the good ones, you know, but not rank them. You know, every talent management software does it a little bit differently. But nonetheless, what they do is they screen through these resumes. And at the end, there are some resumes that the employer can screen through. And when they do within 7 seconds, they try to determine if you're the fit for this particular position, in this case, customer service management. And let's imagine 3 different hiring managers are looking at this resume, and within 7 seconds, they want to determine if this is the right match. The first hiring manager looks at the top of the resume. Within 7 seconds, sees the words computer programs, wholesale, and lending. Now I want you to close your eyes and think about what these 3 words represent. What image do they create? When you close your eyes, you'll see that there is an image that's created about this applicant, right? Computer programs, wholesale, and lending. Let's call that image 1. Hiring manager number 2 looks at the same resume, but this time looks at the middle of the resume. And this hiring manager sees the words admin, clerical, administrative assistant. Now close your eyes, think about these 3 words. And what does that represent? What image does that create? Now categorize that into an image. Call it image 2. And then the third hiring manager is accustomed to look at a resume and quickly scan and get to the bottom. And when they do, this hiring manager, when he or she does, sees the words funder, Downey Savings, and insurance. Now I want you to close your eyes and build an image, and now we call that image number 3. So you have 3 different images about the same person. Are these 3 images very different from one another? And the answer is yes, they're very different. The first one, the image is different than the second and the third. We want to create a resume that does not create all these different images about us, right? Here's a second one. The first hiring manager sees the words secretary. The second hiring manager sees the words medical assistant. And the third one sees, let's say, car courier and Pasadena. These are 3 different images, right? What does this do? What happens when 3 different images are created about or of the same resume? Well, what happens is that if they are not in consistence with the job description or what that job requires, a customer service management in this case, then the resume is going to be rejected, right? Or there's not going to be any interest created for that resume. What we want to do is make sure that when a hiring manager looks at our resume, and when there's multiple numbers, let's say 3 to 5 different hiring managers look at our resume, they don't arrive at 3 to 5 different conclusions. So let's take a look at this resume. You have 5 different hiring managers, or the same 3 hiring managers look at this resume, and what's the very first thing they see if they're hiring customer service managers? They see the path. That's the path that we defined when we read job descriptions, right? When we did our exercise last week. Then they start reading the resume, and they don't read the whole thing. They may read just the first words, and it reads experienced customer service manager. You see that? And now they're interested in reading some more. And as they're reading some more, now we can see that this resume is one of interest. Most importantly, 3 different hiring managers will arrive at exactly the same conclusion, that this is a customer service management proposition. This is a resume asking for us to review his or her resume and be considered for customer service management. Okay, so that's number 6, is to get the path across. This is the path on the top. Whenever we talk about the path on your resume, we're talking about this line right here, to get that across within 7 seconds. Okay, let's move on to number 7. Integrity is rule number 1. This actually should be the first one. It shouldn't be the 7th one, but on this PowerPoint it's the 7th one, so I'll explain it in that order. But it is the most important one. Integrity is rule number 1. You can never compromise this rule. So if the employer is looking for a red apple that is rotten on the bottom, and we know we have apples, but we don't have red apples that's rotten on the bottom, customer service management is different than customer service management, right? So we don't want to say we have rotten red apples when we don't, right? We can be successful and still maintain integrity on a resume. Remember that if you go to an interview or on your resume, if you push the truth even a little bit, if you stretch it even just a little bit, ultimately you may get the job and you may maintain that job. But what you have compromised is something within that is very pure, is very clean, and it's natural. It is intrinsic within human beings to tell the truth, to do the right thing. And that is good for us, right? It is good for us as humans. You know, when you eat some good food, right? If you stay away from sugars and salts, eat some natural food, some food that's really good for you, and for everyone that means something different, right? But we all agree that something like fat, or well, some fat's good for you, but let's say sugar, white sugar, we all agree that's not good for you. If you eat something that's good for you, then your body appreciates that. Well, some things are good for you and are not things you eat. And always having integrity, that's good for you, right? And if you look throughout history, there's been two schools of thought. Jean-Jacques Rousseau believed that people intrinsically will do that which benefits them, and they will cheat and steal and lie as long as it benefits them. And Plato had the opposite view. Plato believed that we are intrinsically instinctively programmed to be good, to tell the truth, to always do the right things. And I'm of the belief with the camp of Plato. I believe people are intrinsically programmed to be good. And evidence of this is if you look at videos of the Boston bombing, you remember the marathon and the bombing? There are pictures of people that are running towards the explosion to help people who were hurt. And if Jean-Jacques Rousseau was right about his assessment, people would be running away. And if, think about this example, if there was an infant on the side of the street and was crying, there isn't anybody on this call who would walk the other way because the infant would be trouble, right? If Jean-Jacques Rousseau was right, people would just walk away, say, hey, I don't want the trouble of helping this infant. But the truth is that every one of you in this call would walk towards that infant and help that infant. So we know that intrinsically we want to be good, but what happens is as we grow up, we learn that we can get some things that benefit us if we stretch the truth. And I'm saying that's not good for your soul, it's not good for your spirit, it's not good for whatever it is you call that's intrinsically embedded within you. Right? So we tell the truth, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's good for you. And finally, number 8, master the art of presenting an argument persuasively. Remember number 5? We said that's really important. Remember which one number 5 was? Number 5 was create a base resume. Remember I said that's the most important? Well, this is the second most important out of the 8. So number 5, create a base resume is really important, but mastering the art of presenting an argument persuasively is just as important. So the natural way of presenting a resume is to just put everything on a piece of paper and send it out. That's a natural way. The skill, though, is to construct the information in a way where we can persuasively argue our position. Now, remember when you send your resume, it first goes through a scanner then someone screens their resume, and then there is someone that reads the resume, right? So you email your resume, a scanner scans the content of your resume. Let's say out of 1,000 resumes, narrows it down to 100. The screener screens your resume, looks for keywords that we already showed you that at point 6. And then once it's narrowed down to, let's say, 10 resumes that the screener has narrowed it down to, it goes to someone who reads the resumes, and then from those they select 1 or 2 or 5 or however many, and then they call that person for an interview, or those people for an interview. Today, to find employment, you must possess 3 things, right? So the first thing is you must have some hard skills. We identified those on the master's list. You must have some soft skills, right? And you must also present those hard and soft skills in a persuasive manner, right? So the hard skills is I'm a project manager. The soft skills is I have great negotiations ability and ability to communicate. And then we want to persuasively present them as an argument. You also want to have a positive attitude, because a negative attitude, no matter how many hard skills or how many soft skills, will be a hindrance. That's why the 5 steps we follow, step 1 is ignite your inner fire, right? Step 2 is career path, and today is step 3, right? So step 1 is to make sure we are moving forward with a positive attitude. Now let's talk about an argument, because as we just saw here, you want to present your hard and soft skills in a persuasive way using an argument. So what is an argument? Let me tell you what an argument is not. An argument is not to sell yourself. You know how sometimes people say, hey, when you want to be successful at getting a job, make sure you can successfully sell yourself. Well, what does that really mean, sell yourself? Is that like selling something like a piece of furniture, or when you sell a car? What does that mean, how do I sell myself? What do I say? What do I do? You're not really selling yourself. You're presenting an argument. So an argument is not to sell yourself. How about this one? Is it an arguing with a friend? No, that's not an argument either. An argument is an art. It's a science. How about an elevator speech? Is an argument an elevator speech? Have you heard of that? When people tell you to be successful at getting a job, just prepare an elaborate elevator speech. I don't know about you, but if I was presented with an elevator speech, one that was canned, it wouldn't be very persuasive for me. Would it be for you? When was the last time you were persuaded to do anything for anyone when they presented you that thing with an elevator speech or using an elevator speech, right? It's not very persuasive. An argument is not what you do in a conversation, and it's not a mere presentation. So what is an argument? An argument is a claim put forward with supported evidence using reason. So you make a claim. What is the claim? The claim is, I'm the best fit for this job. You show evidence that you're the best fit for the job, and you reason why they should hire you. So that's what an argument is. Now, your resume is an argument. Your interview techniques are constructed based on an argument, and persuasion occurs through an effective argument. Argument has these parts to it, right? So it has an assumption, it has evidence. Evidence holds up the conclusion, and there are gaps in the middle. The areas we need to be focused on is evidence and conclusion. So you have this conclusion, which is, you should hire me. That's the conclusion. The conclusion is, I'm a great fit for your organization. You should hire me. And then we want to show evidence for that. So every argument to have evidence has a series of premises, okay? Premises. So if you and I are speaking and I say, what is your premise for getting a job with this organization? That's what we're looking for in your resume, is we're looking for premises that when combined, they will become the evidence. You may have 30 premises that become the evidence, right? And these combined, the premises which become your evidence, will then lead to the conclusion. And the assumptions we want the person to make, the person who is listening to your premise and your conclusion, the assumption is that this is the best fit for this organization. This person, this individual is the best fit for our organization. So let me give you some examples. Let's say the conclusion is that cats are good for me. That's the conclusion. Tell me which one of these premises is the best one to validate this argument. The argument is cats are good for me, right? Or this is the conclusion of the argument. And there are these premises. So I have cats have good meat. That's why cats are good for me. Cats are sweet. That's why cats are good for me. Cats smell good. That's why cats are. Are these evidence? If you put these three together, does it lead to the conclusion that cats are good for you? Well, most people will look at this argument and say, this is a really weak argument. You know, why would that make cats good for you, right? And that's what a resume is. You see, resumes, you look at the whole thing, and you must then conclude at the end of looking at the whole thing, at the entire resume, that they should hire you. Sometimes your resume is a very weak argument for why they should hire you. Coincidentally, whatever you put on your resume as an argument is what you talk about at the interview. So you are reinstating your argument. So the resume is really a pathway. It is a roadmap that we use at the interview to make our case. Here's another one, another argument for why cats are good for me. High blood pressure leads to heart attacks. So you think about this and say, yeah, that's true. High blood pressure does lead to heart attacks. Heart attacks can kill people. That's true too. Heart attacks kill people. I have high blood pressure. Let's say you check with a doctor and say, yeah, you do have high blood pressure. You want to live. And someone asks you, say, do you want to live? You say, yeah, I want to live. I have high blood pressure. I know heart attacks can kill people, and high blood pressure leads to heart attacks. Now you go to a doctor, and your doctor is certain that cats lower your blood pressure. And in fact, there is research and science that shows cats lower blood pressure. Are cats good for you? And the conclusion is correct. Yeah, cats are good for you. How do I know? Well, I know because high blood pressure gets heart attacks. Heart attacks kill people. I want to live. I don't want to die. And my doctor said I need to have cats. He knows better than I do. And there's your evidence. Which one of these two arguments is a better one? Argument 1 for why cats are good for you, or argument 2? Okay, so I'm going to give you a few moments to take a look. Some people create resumes that are based on argument 1, and they wonder why they're not getting callbacks. Some people create resumes that's based on argument 2. And argument 2 is the way you want to reason why an employer should hire you. You see how this is a science? Do you see how argument 2 progresses the logic, right? 1 builds 2, builds 3, builds 4, and bam, the last, my doctor is certain. Not my doctor said maybe. My doctor is certain. That's why it's capital C. It's certain. I want to emphasize that cats lower my blood pressure. There is authority there, right? You're not saying I'm certain cats lower blood pressure because you don't have the authority to say that. Some authority is certain that cats lower blood pressure. So this line of reasoning is important when you create a resume. So let's say your conclusion now is I'm the best candidate for this job and you should hire me. Why should I hire you? Well, I'm the best candidate for this job and you should hire me because I'm motivated, I'm dedicated, I love to work for your company. Have you ever heard that line of reasoning? Why should I hire you? Well, you should hire me because I'm motivated, I'm dedicated, I love to work for your company. In fact, I bet if I did a survey, I should have done a survey, but I don't have one ready. I bet you if I did a survey, more than 70% of you, if I said, why should I hire you? You would say, because I'm dedicated, I'm motivated, I'm loyal. You would give me a list of qualities that you think employers would value without knowing whether they value those qualities or not. Now, the problem with this line of reasoning is, if you say I'm motivated, how do I know you really are? Well, I have to trust you, right? Well, I just interviewed 20 other people who told me the same thing. It just happens that most people answer in this way. Why should I hire you? I'm motivated. Well, 20 other people told me the same thing. Which one of you do I hire? Which one of you do I trust? Even if I have the best of intentions, which one of you do I really trust to be motivated? See, the truth is I don't know. So if I don't know which one of you to trust, I'm not going to trust any of you. I'm going to assume that when you say you're motivated, that you're not. And this, coupled with my experience as a hiring manager. Let's say I'm a hiring manager for 20 years, and I've been in situations where someone said they're motivated. I hired them, and after I hired them, they weren't all that motivated. And I learned from that experience, when people say they're motivated, it's not necessarily true. So this line of reasoning is not very strong. I love to work for your company. Well, the fact that you are at the interview infers that you like to work for the company. If you didn't, you wouldn't be there. So I'm just wasting my time with this line of argument because I'm not really adding anything new. So, and there is no evidence for why I should hire you. There is no evidence here, right? The premises are weak. Look at this one. Argument 2. Your company is looking to expand its market share by getting into Walmart. See, I've done research. I know this to be a fact. You need someone with the ability to convince buyers at Walmart in negotiating the terms. See, I know if they're trying to get into Walmart, they need this. I have a proven track record in convincing buyers. Now, this proven track record I need to have evidence for, right? So you can't just say, I have a proven track record. You have to show what that proven track record is. But let's assume for a second that you have that. I possess strong negotiation skills. Again, that statement I need to back up. I need to have evidence for that too. But I'm on the right track because I am making claims I can back up now. And then I've established relationships with other vendors that are similar to Walmart. You see this argument, how it progresses? So now look at argument 1 and 2. I'm motivated, I'm dedicated, I love to work for your company. How can I prove I'm motivated? Well, I can tell a story, right? That backs up my claim. I'm dedicated, I can tell a story, and those are all good, right? They back up my claim, they offer evidence. But it's better to look for something that I know the employer cares about. I know this employer cares about expanding its market by getting to Walmart, and then I'm going to show why I can get them that, and I'll back that up with proof. It's a stronger argument. I'm not saying the first one is not a good argument, it's just not very strong. So to wrap this up for today's introduction of arguments and how this translates to a resume is that we have a bunch of premises that leads to a conclusion, and these premises must be supported by evidence. If you have a bunch of premises but don't have evidence, you can get rid of those lines. It doesn't connect what you're saying to the conclusion. The conclusion is, why should I hire you? The premise is for these reasons. If you don't have evidence, there is no connection, right? So when we create the resume, we have to have premises that are connected through evidence to the conclusion. The conclusion is not going to be on your resume, right? The conclusion is, why should I hire you? But we're going to put the premises and the evidence on the resume. Does this all make sense? Is there any questions so far? Okay, so let's move on, and I'm going to just share one more thing about arguments, and then we'll end with our final piece of today's presentation. So finally, framing an argument is also important. So how we frame our argument. Now, the media frames arguments all the time. I want you to look at these 3 different frames. Let's say something happened, there was a storm, and there was an accident. So think about this for a moment. There's a storm in your city and there's an accident. So the media frames it as frame 1. Youth at home, disobey warning. That's the headline. Knocked out in storm-related accident. So think about this. What does this frame, this first frame, what does this help you arrive at as a conclusion? That the youth in our community, if they didn't disobey things, this bad thing wouldn't have happened. Here's the second one. Girl at home injured during storm. Home had been cited for building code violations. What conclusion does this one build for you? Very different than the first frame, right? Even though there's been an accident, the second one tells you those building code people, if they would have watched their violations, this poor girl wouldn't have been harmed in this accident. And the third one, teen hurt in freak storm. I was terrified. See, this third frame could be an environment issue. You know, you may arrive at the conclusion that, see, we have this global warming thing going on, and the weather's really getting freaky. You see how we frame the argument helps the reader arrive at a certain conclusion? So the occurrence is the same for you as well. Just like the occurrence here was there was a storm and there was an accident, the occurrence for you is that you have a set of skills and the employer is looking for someone with your skills. Now, how you frame this helps them arrive at a certain conclusion, right? So I want you to mull over everything we talked about today. There's a lot of information, right? A lot of information you received. I want you to think about the 10 objectives that we talked about, right? So let me go back here and just kind of review the 8 objectives with you. So let's go over the 8 concepts here. So the first one is our objective is not to create a resume, but to create a resume that works. Right? Our second objective is focus is more important than diversity. Showing focus when speaking about your skills is more important than showing diversity. The third one is companies care more about how your skills are relative to their positions and not so much interested in viewing a sequential order of your work experience. 4, do not mix the skills. 5, create a base resume first, right? 6, get the path across within 7 seconds, right? We talked about this. Integrity is rule number 1. And master the art of persuasive argument. Okay, so now that we've covered all of this, what's your next step? Well, your next step is not to work on your resume. I can't tell you how important this is. See, if you have a resume and you've been sending it out, keep sending it out the same way as if you've never taken this class. If you didn't take this class, what would you do? You'll keep sending your resume, right? So keep doing that. Because I don't want you to engage in an activity that doesn't help you. It wastes your time, because time is of essence for all of you, right? So what I encourage you to do is spend more time this week on the career path. Fundamentally, that is such an important step before we get to the resume. So what I encourage you to do is this. Let me pull up, just bear with me here. Okay, so we're online, and what I'd like you to do is, if you would please, go to anycouncil.com and go to jobs, and when you get there, you're going to use these search boxes to search for jobs. Okay, there's some quick links down here on the left, on the right. You can search there too, and then identify 3 top priorities. So that's what your assignment is for this week, is to do assignments for week 1 and do assignments for week 2, which is to identify 3 paths that we can then build resumes based upon. Remember, paths, they drive the content of your resume. And this week, I want you to spend all of your time, all of your energies to identify what those three paths are. If you are unable to identify your path by next week, then bring your questions and we'll talk about it for the first 30 minutes of the class. Because then after that, we're going to then learn how to construct a resume. Okay, keeping in mind these 8 concepts we talked about today.